I've had a gun pointed at me 5 times in my lifetime. 4 times were by police officers on routine traffic stops. I don't know an African-American man that doesn't have that story. I know very few men of color who don't have that story.
We have to say Black Lives Matter in this instance because we're being shown that they don't. People are killing us in broad daylight, looking right into the camera and not seeming to care a bit about it.
We're going into a space where I'm not pretending everything is going to be fixed in a couple of weeks, but it's giving everyone a chance to feel like they can attain the American dream, and that's what it's about.
Welcome to Culture Conversations, a new show where we amplify diverse voices and celebrate culture. I'm your host, Mimi Brown. Thank you for watching. Today we're talking to Marqueece Harris-Dawson. He's an LA City Council member who has introduced new legislation that many can relate to. So I want to start with driving while Black. You recently introduced new legislation that would remove LAPD officers and replace them with transportation enforcement officers when being pulled over in minor traffic violations. What's the reasoning behind this new proposal?
Well, the reasoning behind this new proposal is at least threefold. Firstly, as we look at the role of police officers in our society and how we've just let their mission drift so that now officers are called for a variety of things, it's a question of efficiency. Secondly, a interaction between a government worker and a driver or a pedestrian or anybody on the road for that matter doesn't need to have an armed government worker involved in it. Most of those things are like parking tickets. People give out parking tickets. We literally give out thousands of them a day. And those people are not armed. And I think traffic violations can be the same. The third thing is when you look around the country, a lot of police misconduct or police mishaps that results in injury or even death starts as a result of a routine traffic stop. So Castillo pulled over for a broken taillight. So those are some of the reasons that we put this forward. We want to eliminate as many mistakes as we can that end up in resulting in the loss of human life.
Another name that also comes to mind is Sandra Bland.
That's right.
And you recently shared your own personal story of what happened to you during a routine traffic stop. Can you share a little bit about that?
Well, there are so many routine traffic stops that happen, particularly when you're African-American young male driving almost anywhere in the country, but certainly here in LA. I've been saying for years, I've had a gun pointed at me 5 times in my lifetime. 4 times were by police officers on routine traffic stops. They weren't accusing me of a violent crime. They weren't accusing me of trafficking in narcotics. They weren't accusing me of trafficking in human beings or anything that would require them to use violence against me. Yet they brandished a weapon. And I think all too often, because of their ability to stop you at any time for almost any reason, it creates an untenable, unconscionable situation. I don't know an African-American man that doesn't have that story. I know very few men of color who don't have that story. I don't know anybody who knows an African-American man that doesn't have that story. And so it's just time to put that to bed and put it to rest and get police back to doing police work. That is both preventing, intervening, and tracking down violent crime.
And I know this is one of the many ways that you were talking about reimagining public safety, but what are some of the other ways? Can you share a little bit of those?
Some of the ways that we think about reimagining public safety comes from what the community says, but it also comes from what officer says. And so there are really 3 areas. One is traffic that we've already talked about. The other is homelessness. Far too many of the uses of force in LAPD are on people who are houseless. And so we know that people who are houseless are disproportionately facing mental health challenges, they're facing substance abuse challenges, and they're just facing dire poverty. None of that requires an armed officer. Now, sometimes when there's violence or someone has a weapon or is brandishing a weapon or being violent, you do need a police officers. But we think a good amount of what happens with homeless people doesn't need to be handled and shouldn't be handled by the police. Indeed, the city's been sued several times because of police interaction with homeless people. That's why we can't enforce our law that says you can't sleep on the sidewalk, is because of that traces back to an interaction between LAPD officers and homeless people. The other is mental health. People in my district call me all the time, and people from all over the city. They say, I have someone on my block. A lot of times I have someone in my house who's having a mental health episode. I don't want to call the police because if they were to get killed, I couldn't live with myself. If they were to get killed as a result of my call, I couldn't live with myself. But I do need someone to come intervene in this situation because it's becoming unsafe. And so the city and the county need to have mental health workers that respond to those calls.
And recently, the LA School Board cut its budget by $25 million from its school police budget. You wrote that is a huge win for Black kids and their families. How so?
Well, it's just a reinvestment in because I look at both the cut and what they put the money into. Sometimes we make cuts in the government and we just send the money to rich people in the form of a tax break. That doesn't really help anything. In this situation, they cut the money and they invested in programs that help students be more whole, that contribute to wellness, that contribute to violence prevention, and contribute to conflict resolution. Everybody knows when you're a teenager, stuff happens. Certainly when you're adolescent, stuff happens. And so you need some intervention. That intervention doesn't need to be an armed government worker that looks a lot like the regular police department.
And what's the biggest challenge facing your constituents right now?
The biggest challenge facing our constituents right now is we have this killer pandemic on the loose and a national government who's not doing anything to deal with it, frankly, who's making the problem worse. And so now the United States has the worst infection rate of any country in the world. And Black and Latino people, which make up almost all my constituents, certainly over 90% of them, are dying at double and triple the rate of everybody. And so that's the biggest thing we face as a matter of life and death. And then, we have all the attendant challenges that come with that, whether it's the decline in the economy, the kinds of jobs that were lost, hairdressers, those are people that live in my district, people that work in hotels. Those are people who live in my district. People who are security guards at buildings that are now closed and not in operation, those are people who live in my district. So those are really the two biggest things that we're facing.
And we know that COVID-19, as you just said, is impacting Black and brown communities, at a higher rate. That kind of stems from the systematic racism that we've been protesting, recently. But what do you think can be done to fix those disparities right now within communities of color?
Well, you need justice. So people who go to work, you need to pay them the wages that it costs to live. Our kids need to go to schools that are funded as well as any other schools, if not better than any other schools, because they're trying to catch up from behind. We need a public safety system that keeps people safe in a community, but doesn't over incarcerate. So there are very concrete things that we can do, and folks are working at those things in all level. It's just a system that is this old and this big takes a lot of force in order to change. And that's what I say everybody can do. Stay in the streets, stay on social media, keep calling the question, keep protesting, keep challenging your leaders to make those changes as fast as we can. We've seen more change in the last 6 weeks than I've seen in my entire life as an activist. And cumulatively, and I've been an activist all of my adult life. So the power truly is with the people.
And we saw you out there in a few marches. How was that?
It was great to be out there in the marches. Everybody was masked up and we were trying to keep our distance from each other. But it was great to see a march where, for once in my life, Black people weren't left to deal with the problem with a Black person. There were white people, lots of Latinos, Asians, people from all walks of life saying, this is not the government that I want to live in. This is not something that I find acceptable. And I'm going to stay in the streets until a change is made.
Absolutely. And I noticed you have quite the record collection behind you. Can I ask what's your favorite?
Wow, that's hard. My favorite record, I think, is Songs in the Key of Life by Stevie Wonder. I think it's one of the best albums ever produced, and it's especially good at this moment.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Councilman. Thank you for talking with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for doing this, and look forward to seeing your work in the future.
You
have a huge following. Everyone knows who you are. But for those who live under a rock, can you tell me who is Karen Civil and how you got started?
Hey, what's up? This is Karen Civil.
Karen Civil.
She is one of the most powerful forces in entertainment.
Please welcome the woman who, the New Yorker says, the woman who has made Hillary Clinton cool.
Do you and Hillary Clinton know each other?
We met each other via Karen Civil.
Karen Civil is CEO of Always Civil Enterprise, which is my marketing branding agency. And we've had a collective of so many different people underneath it, from Lil Wayne to working with Louis Vuitton to Hillary Clinton.
How's business? Booming.
And, you know, lifestyle influencer, philanthropist is who I am as well.
And speaking of philanthropy, each year Karen uses her platform, the Live Civil Foundation, as a way to give back.
It started with me building out a park in Haiti. It then turned into rebuilding the school that was nearby, which we renamed the Live Civil School and also playground. Then it went into building a computer lab, because again, I'm big on the computer. I want to give kids the opportunity. And in Los Angeles, which I'm really excited about, is helping the homeless population. So working with Connections for Home and 400 Ways, we have 100 families that we have adopted, that we take care of, that we're helping get back on their feet. Because unfortunately, with short-term like housing, it's not realistic for a family to get their finances together in a month. So we give them up to a year. You know, we're making sure the kids are going to school, that they have everything that they need, that they feel like they're a part of the community.
And Karen is constantly juggling projects. Her clients range from rappers to politicians.
It was great working with Hillary, and it was great to see so many different people who were who all came out to who cared about their rights. And that's what really got me excited about the election. And I'm excited again this year, making sure I utilize my platform again and just telling people, let's go out there, let's vote. Doesn't matter who you vote for, but just making sure you are using your voice.
During the protests, we've seen a lot of college kids, we've seen a lot of high schoolers. You know, how can we harness that same energy and take it to the polls this November?
I want change. I want safety.
We're seeing this uprising of just the youth are not going for it, and folks are tired. And really, it boils down to this. Granted, we are dealing with an epidemic, which is COVID-19. But the fact that racism, that COVID had to take a backseat to racism, and the world prioritized racism first, and we're out fighting the social injustice, that lets you know this is going to dictate how the polls are going to go. With protest comes change. So to see the many different things that's happening, you know, certain words are being removed from our vocabulary, certain holidays, monuments, and I love it. We're going into a space where I'm not pretending everything is going to be fixed in a couple of weeks, but it's giving everyone a chance to feel like they can attain the American dream, and that's what it's about. So I didn't realize so many things were tied into slavery, and I'm glad that people, without us even acknowledging it, they're acknowledging their like slave ties or their ties to slavery and just removing it. So from words like master bedroom to just the Dixie Chicks, all of it, you can go. If you were rooted in slavery or in hatred or racism, the words can go. I'm okay with learning new lingo and just being fair and having equality for everyone. So I'm excited for this change. To everyone, keep marching. I'm going to continuously donate, continue amplify my platform. And that's been the biggest thing for me, is making sure to donate. So, you know, the businesses who may be affected or the people who may be locked up or who don't feel encouraged, I'm going to continuously donate so your voice is being heard.
And that was actually my next question. You know, everyone right now is thinking, I want to do something, I want to help, you know, how can I be a part? And I was, you know, how are you helping to keep the message front and center?
I have focused on identifying smaller organizations who are doing the work in the community, who have not been given grants, who have not had money donated to them. So the great thing is, just this week alone, I've found 10 organizations. I've found 10 small organizations and giving $1 million to. I'm really excited. we love Colin Kaepernick and we love, you know, Black Lives Matter, but there are also small organizations who may be helping crop or grow food in the community, who may have, you know, been providing food for the community and they lost out in their business or something to that effect. One is Crenshaw Dairy Mart, Summer Over Everything. Those are two basic ones in Los Angeles I really like a lot. And then helping with Apartment 4B, which was a Melrose location who unfortunately got damaged during the protest, and working with client Russ, who was able to donate $25K to them to help them reopen. So that's just been my biggest thing, is just connecting and finding businesses and organizations who are really doing the work, who feel like, I don't think anybody will ever see me. And that's not the truth at all, is making sure you're not small donations. This is 80K plus to each organization, over like 100K. Again, the goal is to give away $1 million this week. And I'm just like, that's just me, just finding, you know, the small, if you even want to call them the small businesses, and amplify them and help them grow and nurture to blossom into that big, beautiful flower.
And Karen's message has always been clear.
I want to create generational wealth. So a lot of these organizations, companies who have been coming to me like, hey, I'm like, wait a minute, we're not going to end racism in a week, and we're not going to end it with a black box with white lettering. So let's figure out within your company, how many people of color, how many women of color, like what are we doing to create generational wealth, and not just something for this week? What are we doing to help your employees and your consumers a year from now? How are we implementing certain things? Are we making sure their voices are heard? Are you making sure that they're being seen in our commercials, in our advertising? Are we making sure to put money back into the community? Those are the conversations, the hard conversations I'm having with these companies who have been very open and understanding. And I'm like, if you're looking for me to come for a quick fix, I'm your wrong girl. I'm the wrong girl. I want longevity, I want generational wealth, and I want opportunities, because I know what it felt like. I took the beating at a lot of these companies, and I took the racism and dealt with a lot of stuff. But the next person coming through that door, I don't want them to feel it. I went through hell for them to go through heaven, and I want them to enjoy it.
And what does a real life Karen think about the white Karens gone wild? You
can control this type of behavior. You're choosing not to. So you're making people label you as this. And that's a technical, how they want to label it as slur. That's for white women. If you tuck your racism, they won't call you a Karen, and mind your business. Tuck your racism and mind your business, and watch your tongue.
My next guest has researched the rise of citizen journalism and how it's become a powerful tool in the fight against police brutality. Allissa V. Richardson, you are the author of Bearing Witness While Black, African Americans, Smartphones, and the New Protests. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me, Mimi.
Absolutely. I was taken with the term Black witnessing. Can you explain what that means and how you came up with the phrase?
Yes, Black witnessing is really a unique kind of looking. And what I noticed when I started to do the research for the book is that there have been 3 overlapping eras of domestic terror against Black people, starting with slavery, giving way to lynching, and then mutating to what we have now, which is police brutality. And I looked at each of those eras and said, we've never been able to really bear witness to our own struggle in person. During the times of slavery, slaves could not look at other slaves being beaten. If we think about lynching photographs, we were not in the fringes of those photographs. We were not in the corner anywhere. We were huddled at home, hoping that our loved ones would come home. But now, through smartphones, this is really the first time that we get to be in control of the tool that will capture that pain. And so what I started to look at was all of these police videos that were surfacing were being filmed by Black people. And so I developed this term Black witnessing to describe this kind of defiant looking that for the first time is enabled by technology. And that's really the work of the Black witness, to show that this is not a new phenomenon and that people want it to stop.
What made you want to take a deeper dive into Black Americans and their use of the cell phone cameras to document police brutality?
I think about Rodney King and the Rodney King videos that happened right here in LA in 1991. That's really the first time we see someone use their own hands to capture that media. And then in 2009, I think about Oscar Grant And I think about New Year's Day when five other people pulled out their cell phones and recorded the brutality that led to his death. And so throughout time, Black people have been using journalism and whatever technology they had at the time to really shine a light on injustices against them. This, however, is the first time that we're using that tool without this middle person, this middleman, if you will. And this is the first time that we're able to get it to the families to help them get justice.
We do know, though, that cell phone video has been a game changer when it comes to documenting the things that Black people have been saying have been happening against us for so long. But I'm curious, can you talk a little bit about how you feel, how it's changed the narrative for others, for white people in particular, when it comes to policing or police shootings?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's been most interesting about studying this over the last 5 years is that there's been an incredible shift in white sentiment. At first, when we started to look at the data and people were saying Black Lives Matter, there was a huge white lash, as Van Jones calls it. And many white people were uncomfortable with that phrase. They were just saying, well, of course, all lives matter. You know, why would we be singling out Black Lives Matter? But we have to say Black Lives Matter in this instance because we're being shown that they don't. People are killing us in broad daylight, looking right into the camera and not seeming to care a bit about it. But this video, Mimi, this video of George Floyd, it was incontrovertible that there was no need for that officer to use that kind of force and to be that callous in the taking of George Floyd's life. And I think that since we were coming out of a pandemic and many Americans had already been at home, we were all kind of primed to be looking at the same channels for reliable information about coronavirus, we couldn't escape at this time.
And lastly, in the book, you spent time talking to about 15 Black Lives Matter activists. How important was it for you to talk to them and include them in the book?
It was really important for me to center their voices. And I really wanted to pull out some of the exemplars to show that we've always been creative. We've always used communication, not just to entertain people, but to inform. And so I had people like Clint Smith, who just earned his doctorate from Harvard, who at the time was a student and was using his voice, even though he wasn't finished school and all of these other things, he was educating as he was going along. Everything that he learned at Harvard, he was sharing on Twitter. And millions of people began to follow him. He had a TED Talk that's been viewed over 6 million times. People like David Banner, who used to be a rapper, who is still a rapper, but would call himself more of a public intellectual now. I also interviewed people like Chris Stewart, who is the attorney, family attorney for Alton Sterling and Walter Scott, and now George Floyd. When I talked to people like Brittany Packnett Cunningham too, she was dynamic in terms of her vision for what she could push the government to do. And she was sitting on President Obama's 21st Century Commission for policing. Again, if I think about people like Marissa Johnson, she's another one I interviewed. You may remember she's the one who interrupted Bernie Sanders on his campaign trail. And she kind of went out there with her purple braids and said, look, you all are going to give me a minute to talk. She stepped in front of him. She said, we are going to be silent for 4 minutes, because 4 hours was how long Mike Brown lay in the street uncovered. So again, when you think about naming people and not writing an academic book that just has like a survey and some monikers on the side with some pseudonyms, I thought it was very important to just be like, no, these are the people who are doing the work.
And that will do it for us. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, share, and keep the conversation going.